Section 29 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Chapter 7, Part 2. He had one last hope which he had thought best not to suggest to Julie, namely, to prevail upon Monsieur Antoine. He drove to his house first, but he wasted there all the eloquence of his heart and his reason. The selfish fellow was happy, triumphant. He was drinking his revenge with gusto, and he did not propose to leave a drop in the bottom of the glass. All that Marcel could obtain, after exchanging many reproaches and invectives, was that Julian and his mother should be left in ignorance of the bargain by which they were made rich. "You are trying to do a very difficult thing," he said. "Do not make it impossible. Madame d'Estrelles is the only one who has submitted thus far. Julian would surely resist. Deceive him unless you wish to make Julie's submission useless to your vengeance." "You tire me with your Julie," cried Monsieur Antoine. "She deserves a great deal of pity, doesn't she, when I am giving her everything? Fortune, social consideration, and liberty. Yes, liberty to die of grief. As if people died of that. Pretty twaddle in a lawyer's mouth. Let her make a good marriage suited to her rank. I won't oppose it. She can marry anyone she chooses. I bar nobody but the dauber. Within a fortnight she will open her eyes and thank me. She will recognize my grandeur of soul and will call me her benefactor. Upon my word, you are all cracked. I pull hundreds of thousands of francs from my pocket. I throw them by the handful to ingrates and fools, and they call me cruel kinsman, hard heart, old hound, old miser, and God knows what. The world is upside down just now, on my word." "They won't call you all those names, uncle. They won't call you any name. There are no names to describe the oddity of your character, and nobody else in the world could have discovered the secret of causing the hand that enriches to be cursed." "Bah! You are using big words. You fancy you're at the bar. Off with you. You bore me to death. Tell your Julian whatever you choose. I don't want to see him or you or anybody. I am going back to the country." "That is to say that you will shut yourself up here and barricade yourself against all the strong arguments I can bring forward." "Possibly. Now you know that your strong arguments will be wasted. They will stay at the door." Marcel was careful not to tell his uncle that there was a much simpler and less expensive way to prevent the marriage, namely, to abandon Madame d'Estrelles to her destruction, and trust to the wise and generous reflections to which she had opened her mind. Nor did he feel called upon to tell him that she refused his gifts. After all, he thought, who knows how long this passion will last? In a short time, perhaps, Julie will have conquered it, and then it will be very agreeable to her to know that she is free and still rich. He and Monsieur Antoine drew up a conditional discharge of the whole of her debt, and he succeeded in procuring the insertion of this important modification, that Madame d'Estrelles was at liberty to enter into wedlock with anyone she chose, except an untitled person. He procured Monsieur Antoine's signature and seal to the document, and put it in his pocket, pending an opportune time to hand it to Madame d'Estrelles, that is to say, when she should be less agitated. The deed of gift of the house at Sèvres and of an income of 5,000 francs in the public funds was all ready. Marcel had to fight a terrible battle to prevent the insertion of a restriction analogous to that to which Julie was expected to submit. He argued that, as Julie had promised not to marry Julian, it was entirely useless for Julian to pledge himself not to marry Julie. But Julie can very easily give up her fortune. And then when the other has made enough to live on, I shall have made a fine mess of it. I shall have married them. No, I propose to have a letter from this lady pledging herself on her honor and her religion, never again in her lifetime to see this gentleman, with his name all spelled out. Women are bound tighter by such gilt-edged notes than by all your parchments. They are more afraid of scandal than of pettifogging. I must have that billet doux addressed to me, or I'll not let anything go. You shall have it, said Marcel. And he hurried away to the pavilion. Julian was intensely agitated. He had not dared to ask any questions at the hotel. He had sent his mother to reconnoiter, and she found all the apartments on the garden side closed. He did not know whether the dowager was still there. He knew nothing of Monsieur Antoine's visit and Julie's departure. He was surprised that, after confiding in Madame Thierry, she could not find time to send her 3 lines to set her mind at rest as to the results of the disturbance caused by the dowager. He anxiously awaited the evening. Black thoughts rushed into his mind. Who knows that the dowager and Monsieur Antoine have not plotted together to have Julie abducted and confined in a convent on the grounds of misconduct? At that time it was no longer very easy to obtain letters de cachet, but by going through formalities, an ex post facto judgment, etc., arbitrary incarceration could still be accomplished under the forms of law, especially as an intrigue with a plebeian might still be looked upon in official society as a scandal, which a family was entitled to put down. Julian was going mad when Marcel arrived. Madame Thierry was downcast and very sad. Marcel saw that was not the moment to be outspoken. "I have some news for you," he said, forcing himself to assume an untroubled and even cheerful countenance. "We were about to sign when Uncle Antoine appeared like a god from the clouds at the opera. He lost his temper and had a row with the dowager, who, up to that time, had been acting in concert with him against Madame d'Estrelles. But he has repented of his folly. He proposes to give you a magnificent indemnity. He takes this opportunity to make amends for all the wrong he has done, and he does it handsomely, I must say. So be grateful to him for it. Also, for his intention to deal handsomely with Madame d'Estrelles. He will probably leave her twice as much as the dowager intended to leave her. So she thought that it was her duty to show her gratitude by yielding at once to a whim he had of turning her out of the hotel." "She has gone," cried Julian, turning pale. Gone. She is going to pass a few days in the country. What is there so surprising in that?" "Ah, Marcel," said Madame Thierry, "you see, you don't know." "I do not wish to know anything outside of the serious matters which require all my attention," Marcel replied with decision. "I have heard today many foolish remarks, offensive insinuations, and impertinent comments. I prefer to believe none of them, and to remember none of them. The name of Madame Julie d'Estrelles is sacred to me, but I have advised her to disappear for a few days." "To disappear?" echoed Julian, still in dire distress. "Parbleu! One would think we were in Madrid and that she had been immured for life in a convent cell. What is the cause of this tragic mood? I simply urged her to pretend to be dead for a week or 2, long enough to settle her affairs and find out where she stands. Let us keep quiet and show neither anxiety nor displeasure on account of her absence. Let us not stir up the Marchioness's evil designs. which Monsieur Antoine's intervention has blocked to some extent for the moment. Above all, let us make sure that Julie does not lose the rich old man's protection and esteem. This is no time to puzzle over the man's strange logic. The devil could not explain it. The thing to do, to make the most of it, and no one of us three must think of himself or of anything but Madame de Staël's future. Thereupon he went into detailed calculations which compelled Julian's attention. It was a matter of saving a modest competence for Julie by a little prudence, or of throwing it away by excessive pride. Her reputation was not yet compromised in society, and it was entirely unnecessary that it should be. Thus far, the plot against her formed by the Marchioness and Monsieur Antoine had not been executed. They had been waiting for her to provoke the explosion by an attempt to resist the Dowager's claims. It was Monsieur Antoine's duty now to protect Julie against the charges of which he was the author. He alone could do it, having in his pocket weapons against the common enemy. He was inclined to do it. He was penitent after his manner. He hated the Marchioness. He insisted that everything should be left to him to settle. They must simply bow their heads and wait in silence. Julian was still ill at ease on one point. Did Monsieur Antoine propose to take full charge of Madame de Staël's destiny and willpower in order to bring her to consent to the abominable idea of marrying him? Marcel was able to reassure him completely in that respect, and he gave him his word that fancy had permanently moved out of the old Sphinx's brain. Finally, Julian asked Marcel if he would also give him his word that he had advised Julie to go away suddenly, if she was free to return when she chose, and if she was thoroughly convinced that her absence would be of benefit to herself and only to herself. Marcel was able to swear that all this was true. "Of course you know where she is?" queried Julian. "I do know, but I cannot tell anyone. She made me promise. If she desires to confide her whereabouts to anybody else, she will write. But as she is very anxious that Monsieur Antoine and the Dowager should not know, I think that it will be best for her to have no other confidant but me. Now that all this is cleared up, let me tell you what Monsieur Antoine proposes to give you by way of indemnity for the lease." "One moment," said Julian. "Was this indemnity demanded, insisted upon by Madame de Staël? Was it not the price of some new torture inflicted on her pride, of some sort of sacrifice on her part?" "There was nothing whatever to dispute about," said Marcel. "Monsieur Antoine declared his purpose without any demand or concession whatsoever. He probably always intended to make you this gift, for he is the owner of the house at Sèvres, and he gives it to you. Here are your deeds." "Mon Dieu!" cried Madame Thierry, as she looked over the papers. "And an annuity, too? I feel as if I were dreaming. I am happy, and I am afraid." "Yes," said Julian, still suspicious. "There is something unto this. A trap, perhaps." Marcel had great difficulty in inducing them to accept Monsieur Antoine's treacherous gift. He had to tell them, to swear to them that it was Madame de Staël's earnest desire. He left them as tranquil as possible. Julian, struggling not to disturb by his apprehensions the delight which his mother could not but feel at the thought of returning to the home where she had lived happily for so many years. Marcel then hurried to the Hôtel de Staël and ordered Camille to pack up such articles as their mistress needed for a brief stay in the country. "Ah, mon Dieu!" said the amazed Camille. "Does not Madame la Comtesse send for me to join her?" "It is unnecessary for so short a time." "But Madame can neither dress nor arrange her hair alone. Think of it. A lady has always been served according to her rank. She will find servants in the house where she is. She must be with some poor people then, since she dislikes to have her own servants boarded there. Perhaps Madame is really ruined herself. Alas, alas, such a kind and generous mistress. Camille began to weep, and although her tears were perfectly sincere, she added, "And my wages, Monsieur le Procureur, who will pay them?" "I will pay everything tomorrow," replied Marcel, who was accustomed to that blending of sentiment and practicalness which is always noticeable in such disasters. "Have all the household accounts prepared, and meanwhile take the keys. You will be responsible for everything until tomorrow." "Very good, monsieur. I will be responsible," said the maid, beginning to sob afresh. "But are we to leave Madame's service? Will Madame not return?" "I did not say that, and I have received no orders to dismiss you." Marcel wrote to his wife that he had no time for dinner or supper, and that she need not expect him until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. He returned to the convent. Julie had exhausted all her vitality in tears. She had risen again. She had bathed her pale face, streaked with the fire of tears, in cold water. She was calm, downcast, and resembled a living corpse. She revived a little when she learned that Marcel had succeeded in deceiving Julien, and inducing him to accept, without undue suspicion, the comparative affluence which Monsieur Antoine bestowed on his mother and him. She wrote a note to Monsieur Antoine at Marcel's dictation, pledging herself never to see Julien again during her life, on condition that Julien should never be deprived of the house at Severus or the annuity. She would not make a similar stipulation concerning her own fortune, and Marcel dared not speak to her as yet of accepting Monsieur Antoine's discharge of her debts. She made no complaint. She was thoroughly exhausted, and Marcel, as he shook hands with her, felt that she was feverish. He persuaded her to see Sister Saint-Just, his cousin, and he urged the sister to have someone sleep in the next room. He did not go away until he had, with the solicitude of a father, seen everything arranged as he wished. Julie passed a quiet night. Hers was not one of those obstinate natures which struggle for a long time. Her conscience told her that she had done her duty, and the first suffering was so sudden and violent that she soon yielded to exhaustion and slept. The next morning she thanked the nun who had passed the night with her, and asked to be left alone. She dressed herself and arranged her hair, and, realizing that she was very awkward and unskillful in waiting on herself, she determined to conquer her habits, to put her room to rights and make her bed, arrange her clothes, and establish herself in that poor cell as if she were to pass her life there. She did all this mechanically, without effort and without reflection. When it was done, she sat down, clasped her hands about her knee, and looked out through the open window, but saw nothing, listened to the convent bells, but heard nothing, and did not dare to think of eating, although she had taken nothing for 24 hours. If lightning had struck in the middle of her room, it would not have startled her. End of section 29. Section 30 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Chapter 7, Part 3. About noon, Sister Saint-Just found her in this state of listless contemplation, which she mistook for a beatific reverie. Some broken hearts are still so sweet and gentle that one does not suspect their suffering. But the sister had noticed, as she passed through the room, used as an antechamber and dining room, that the breakfast brought by the servant had grown cold untouched. "Did you forget to eat?" she asked Julie. "No, sister," replied the poor unhappy creature, who did not choose to allow herself to be pitied. "I was waiting for my appetite to come." The nun urged her to eat, obligingly waited on her, and thought to divert her mind by her harmless, unmeaning chatter. Julie listened with inexhaustible good humor, and carried mental submission so far as to seem interested in all the minutiae of that recluse's life, all the details of the regulations of the convent, all the dull little events which occupied the leisure of the community. What did she care, whether she heard that or something else? It was no longer in the power of anyone to annoy or tire her. She was like an empty heart through which everything passes and in which nothing remains. When Marcel arrived in the afternoon, his cousin said, "Why did you tell me that lady was ill and had reasons for being unhappy? She slept soundly without saying a word. She breakfasted reasonably well, although a little late, and she took great pleasure in talking with me. She is a very amiable person, and she has no serious sorrow. I give you my word that she has not, for I know about such things." Marcel was alarmed by this sorrow without reaction. He came to tell her what had taken place that morning at the Hotel d'Estrelles. Julie confined herself to asking him for news of Julian and his mother. When she learned that they were moving and that they were to pass that night at Severus, she would not listen to anything else. "I do not propose to hate anyone any more," she said. "It would cause me more misery and do no good. Do not mention Monsieur Antoine to me for 3 or 4 days. I beg you, my friend, allow me to become accustomed to my lot as best I can. You see that I do not rebel. That is all that is necessary." On the following days, Marcel found her calmer and calmer. She was very pale, but the nun assured him that she slept and ate as much as was necessary, and that was true. She did nothing during the day, and did not wish to see anyone, declaring that she was not at all bored. That was also true. She was preoccupied, and sometimes she smiled. Marcel could not understand it at all. He urged her to consult the convent physician, who found her pulse a little weak, her complexion a little phlegmatic, as they said in those days, to indicate the presence of a certain amount of lymph in the system. He prescribed quinine and told Marcel that it would amount to nothing. It did amount to nothing, except that the heart was dying and the life fading away with it. Julie obediently took the quinine, walked about the garden of the convent, consented to receive visits from several nuns, impressed them as a very attractive person, promised to read some new books which Marcel brought her and which she did not open, prepared a piece of embroidery which she did not begin, lived almost unnoticed in the cloister, thanks to her unobtrusive manners, and continued to waste away slowly, without paroxysms, but without remission. Marcel was deceived by appearances, seeing that she was so placid mentally, and mistaking that sudden disappearance of the will for the symptom of a struggle between a mighty willpower and nature itself. He sought the remedy where it was not. He turned his attention to her physical health. He hired a small country house at Nanterre, and giving Julie to understand that he had purchased it for her, carried her thither. Then, having made sure of Camille's discretion and devotion to her mistress, he sent for her. He supplied her with enough money to enable her to hire a peasant woman who could cook, and he made arrangements that the countess's table should be daintier and more substantial than that at the convent. The little house was located in an airy spot, with a garden of considerable size, surrounded by walls, and with not sufficient shade to keep the sun from doing its healthful work. He supplied the salon with books, little articles to provide occupation or amusement, and Julie's harp. Every woman in those days performed on that instrument more or less, Marcel having taught her her lesson. Camille deceived her mistress as to what had happened at the Hotel d'Estrel, and as to the means at her disposal. She made her believe that everything was extremely cheap at Nanterre, and that she could afford to live comfortably without exceeding the limits of her small income. Julie wished to be poor and to owe nothing to Monsieur Antoine. That was the only point on which Marcel had found her resistance invincible. He had been forced to lie, and to let her believe that Monsieur Antoine had taken possession of her house, her diamonds, and everything that belonged to her. The diamonds were in Marcel's custody. The house was kept in excellent condition. The horses were in the stable well cared for, and the carriages in the carriage house. The servants had been paid off and discharged, under orders to return upon advantageous terms, as soon as Madame d'Estrel should return. The concierge took care of the house, groomed and exercised the horses. His wife dusted the rooms, opened and closed the windows. Monsieur Antoine's head gardener attended to the flowers and lawns. Monsieur Antoine himself visited the place every morning. The pavilion, after Madame Thierry had gone away, was closed and silent, but nothing was changed in Julie's abode. Every piece of furniture was in its place, and the sun shone through the windows of her empty salon. 2 months had passed since the day that Julie left the hotel. Uncle Antoine was simply the caretaker and painstaking administrator of the property. He had retained his privilege of being admitted there, pending the time when it should please Julie to resume possession. He desired to return it to her intact, and to re-employ such of her servants as she might wish to have about her. The concierge was ordered to inform visitors that Madame continued to own her house for the present, and that she had gone to inspect her estate in the Beauvoisis, and to make some definite plans for the future. That is to say, Monsieur Antoine, in concert with Marcel, having in view the "what will people say," represented Madame d'Estrel's situation as the continuation of an armistice with her creditors, and, as she had been in that situation for more than 2 years already, that was really the most plausible explanation. They would see about inventing a perfectly convincing one when Julie should consent to return. It is true, nonetheless, that Julie's friends, the old Duc de Quesnoy, Madame la Présidente, Madame de Morges, Abbé de Nevers, and the rest began to be much surprised that they did not hear from her. Her sudden departure had been accepted with reasonably good grace, thanks to the hints adroitly strewn about by the solicitor. But why did she not write? She must be very lazy, or perhaps she was ill. Was she really in the Beauvoisis? But the old Duke had to go to take the waters of Vichy. Madame la Présidente was engrossed by the marriage of her daughter. The Abbé was like the household cat. He forgot everything when the fire on the hearth died out. Madame de Morges was indolence personified. The Marquise d'Estrel alone would have been likely to investigate the subject seriously, but her malice was suddenly paralyzed by a sharp threat from Monsieur Antoine to disclose her conduct and demand his money if she ventured to make the slightest investigation or the faintest derogatory remark concerning Julie. As will be seen, Monsieur Antoine behaved with extraordinary fairness, prudence, and loyalty in everything that concerned the reputation, the comfort, and the pecuniary interests of his victim. He listened to Marcel's advice, discussed it with him as if the question at issue were what it was best to do for his own daughter, and followed it exactly. Touching the fundamental question as to which Marcel did his utmost to bend him, the union of the two lovers, he was inflexible. And as he lost his temper when Marcel pressed him too hard on that subject, sulked and shut the door in his face. Marcel was compelled, in his client's interest, to submit to delays of which he could see no end. Madame Thierry and Julien were luxuriously established in their pretty cottage, for the best part of the furniture had been left there, as well as diverse artistic objects of considerable value, which Uncle Antoine had disdained to notice because he had no idea of their value. Julien had no confidence in this unexpected generosity, for which he had been warned not to thank Monsieur Antoine, and which was surrounded with inexplicable circumstances. He was so disturbed about it that, except for the duty of sacrificing his own pride to his mother's repose, he would have refused everything. Their position was excellent from a material standpoint. The income of 5,000 francs enabled them to live modestly without awaiting anxiously the avails of Julien's feverish labor at the end of each week. Madame Thierry could not help feeling the most heartfelt delight in being restored to her house, her most cherished memories, her former habits and connections. The latter were less numerous than in the days when her table was always laid, but they were more reliable. Her only true friends came forward once more. Knowing that she had no more than was absolutely necessary, they exerted themselves to provide an advantageous market for Julien's pictures. Not until one had ceased to suffer from poverty can one make the most of his talent. Julien no longer needed to hurry. His customers came unsolicited through the intervention of enlightened and kindly friends. He consoled his mother for the secret dissatisfaction she felt in being Monsieur Antoine's debtor by saying to her, "Never fear, I will pay your debt to him, against his will if need be. It is simply a question of time. Be happy. You see that I am not disturbed by Julie's silence, but that I am waiting confidently and calmly." Julien had changed neither in bearing, nor manner, nor feature since the fatal day of Julie's disappearance. At first he had believed what Marcel said, but as no letter arrived from his mistress, and as he knew beyond doubt, as the result of inquiries he had made secretly, that she was not in the Beauvoisis, he had gradually detected a part of the horrible truth. Julie was free, for Marcel had sworn it on his honor again and again. But as to certain other points he did not swear. He asserted nothing. He simply left them to their presumptions. He refused with shrewd persistence to listen to any confidential communication, which made it easier for him to evade many questions. Monsieur Antoine's Machiavellian plan was too eccentric to be fathomed by Julien's straightforward mind. He did not suppose that jealousy was possible without love, and he would have considered that he insulted Julie's image by admitting that the old man was in love with her. The old man was not in love, that is certain, but he was as jealous as a tiger of Julien, and jealousy without love is the most implacable form of jealousy. Julien believed that he was mad. Can anyone divine the schemes of a madman? But might not those schemes, whatever they were, affect Julie's determination? No, said Julien to himself. Pecuniary consideration cannot have influenced that noble heart. Julie wishes to break with me. She chooses to bring about the rupture in silence. It is painful to her, but she considers it necessary. She trembled for her reputation. The Marchioness threatened to ruin her, and her friends must have succeeded in convincing her that she could never rehabilitate herself after marrying a plebeian. Such is the opinion of society. Julie fancied for a moment that she was superior to such prejudices. Her love for me led her to presume too far on her strength. She has a noble nature, but her mind is a little weak perhaps, and now the force of her character is being exerted to bring about the triumph of the prejudice which kills love. Poor dear Julie! She must suffer because she is kind-hearted, because she understands my suffering. So far as she is concerned, I feel certain that she desires to forget me. End of section 30. Chapter 31 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Chapter 7, Part 4. Marcel had stronger hopes of Julian's mental cure than of Julie's. He saw him as infrequently and for as short a time as possible. One day, when he was obliged to go to report to his aunt concerning a small matter which she had placed in his hands, he found her alone. "Where is Julian?" he asked, in his studio. "No, he is turning his attention to gardening. Since he has had this little plot of land to dig and plant, he is more easily consoled for everything. He has had a great sorrow, Marcel, a sorrow of which you know nothing. He loved Madame d'Estrelles. I was not mistaken, and more than that." "Yes, yes," said Marcel, who desired to avoid any sentimental scene. "That has gone by, hasn't it? That is all over?" "Yes," replied the widow, "I think so. If he were deceiving me, but no, after the hopes he has had, it is not possible, is it, my boy? You can't cheat the eyes of a mother who adores you." "No, of course not. Sleep in peace, dear aunt. I will go to bid Julian good day. If he is really deceiving his mother after the failure of his hopes," he thought as he looked for Julian among the shrubbery, "he must be a devilishly strong fellow." Julian was digging a little hole in which to transplant a tree. He wore a linen blouse and his head was bare. Standing in the loose earth with his hands resting on the handle of his spade, like a laborer taking breath, he was musing so deeply that he did not hear his cousin's step, and Marcel, who saw his profile only, was profoundly impressed by the expression of his face. That manly countenance did not as yet bear the marks of sorrow which were already impairing Julie's beauty, but it had the tense, drawn look of despair which Marcel had had an opportunity to study on her face. Julian spied his cousin, did not start at sight of him, and greeted him with a smile. It was precisely the same smile of lifeless affability with which Julie greeted him, a sweet but terrible smile, like that which we sometimes see playing about the lips of a dying man. "This looks bad," thought Marcel. "He is devilishly strong, no doubt, but he is probably the sicker of the two." Marcel, in his distress, had not the strength to conceal his emotion. He loved Julian dearly. His prudence deserted him. "Tell me," he said, "is anything the matter? Are you unhappy?" "Yes, my friend. You know very well that I am unhappy," replied the artist, dropping his spade and walking with his cousin under the trees. "How could it possibly be otherwise? You are well aware that I loved a certain woman, for my mother told you so. The woman has gone away. Don't tell me that she will return. I know perfectly well that she must return, but I know, too, that it is my duty never to seek her presence again, and to say to myself that she is dead to me." "And have you the courage to accept that conclusion?" said Marcel. "Yes, if it is my duty. You understand, my friend, that a man must always accept his duty. Men submit to it with different degrees of courage. A man. Yes, a man is a man. I am terribly unhappy, Marcel. I propose to endure it. I could endure it alone, you may be sure of that. But you can help me a little. Why do you refuse? What have you been doing the last 2 months is very cruel." "How can I help you?" said Marcel, suspecting some stratagem devised by passion to discover Julie's retreat. "Mon Dieu," replied Julien, reading his friend's thoughts. "It's a very simple matter. You can tell me that she is happier than I am. That is all." "How can I know?" "You see her 2 or 3 times a week. Come, you have done your duty, my friend. You have endured my anxiety with wonderful courage. You have shown very great devotion to her, and to me too, perhaps. But I have discovered several things. I know where she is. I learned yesterday from your son." "Juliet doesn't know what he is saying. Juliet doesn't know her." "Juliet saw her one day at the play. He hasn't forgotten her. He doesn't know her name, so he calls her the country client. He has often spoken to me about her. Her sweetness and fascination impressed him." "Well, what then?" "What then? Why, last Sunday the child went to the festival at Nanterre with a comrade of his own age, to whose parents you had entrusted him for that purpose." "True." "The 2 boys eluded the watchfulness of the parents for a few moments and ran about the village. A tree heavily laden with fruit, hanging over a low wall, tempted their mischievous instincts. Juliet climbed on his comrade's shoulders and attacked the tree. And while he was filling his pockets, he saw a woman whom he recognized pass at his feet. I know the street. I made him describe the woman. I have been to Nanterre and made inquiries in the neighborhood. I have learned that a Madame d'Erlange, that is Julie under an assumed name, lived there with her maid, that she never went out, that no one was watching her, and that she lived alone from inclination, that she was not supposed to be ill, although your son thought she had changed. In a word, I know that she is a prisoner on parole, or that she is afraid of my importunities. Tell me the real reason, Marcel. If it is the latter, tell her to come back, to return to her house. Tell her to have no fear. Tell her that I swear by all that I hold most sacred that she shall never see me again. Do you understand, Marcel? Answer me, and relieve me of the torture of uncertainty." "Well, it is all true," said Marcel after a moment's hesitation. "Madame d'Estrelles is a prisoner on parole, but it is a parole which she herself gave, and which no one compels her to observe. She is at liberty to return, but she cannot see you any more." "She cannot, or she does not wish to." "She neither can nor wishes to." "Very good, Marcel, that is enough. Carry her my oath of submission and bring her back to her own house. She is in dismal quarters now, and that solitude must be ghastly. Let her come back to her friends, her comforts, her liberty. Go instantly. Go, I say. I don't wish her to suffer another moment for me." All right, I will go," said Marcel. "I am going, but what about you?" "As if it made any difference about me," cried Julien. "What? Haven't you gone?" And he took Marcel by the shoulders, embraced him, and pushed him out of the gate. As soon as he had lost sight of him, he returned to his mother. "Well," he said with a smiling face, "everything is going better than I hoped. Madame d'Estrelles is not a prisoner. She will soon return." He watched his mother closely as he spoke. She uttered a joyful exclamation, but a cloud passed over her brow at the same time. Julien sat down beside her and took both her hands. "Tell me the truth," he said. "The marriage project worries you a little, doesn't it? How can you think that I do not long most earnestly for anything that will make you happy? But I thought that you no longer hoped." "I was entirely resigned, and you said, as I did, 'Let us not be discouraged. Let us wait. Let us not think too much. Perhaps she will forget, and in that case perhaps you would do well to forget also. And you answered, I will forget if necessary, and now I see that you rely upon her more than ever. But don't you think that I have reason to rejoice? Tell me frankly if I am under an illusion, for you must try to preserve me from it. Ah, my child, what shall I say to you? She is an adorable creature, and I will adore her with you, but will she be happy with us? You know that Monsieur Antoine proposes to deal almost as generously with her as with us, that he will leave her a competence, so that poverty, which terrified you so, is no longer to be dreaded. What is tormenting you now? Nothing, if she loves you. You sigh when you say that. Do you doubt it, pray? I have doubted it hitherto, my child. What can you expect? If I am unjust to her, it is the fault of you both. You had no confidence in me. I did not see clearly the birth of your love. I did not follow its different stages, and when you said to me one morning, we love each other to distraction, it seemed to me too sudden to be very serious. It seemed to me that you hardly knew each other. When I told your father that I loved him, he had been at work 3 years decorating our house, and I used to see him every day. Several good parties had been proposed to me, but I was very sure that I loved nobody but him. Julie stood in a different position with respect to you. No marriage appropriate to her condition and her ideas about love had ever been within her reach. She was consumed with a craving for love, and was mortally bored without admitting it. She saw you and esteemed you. You deserved it. You attracted her, as it was natural that you should. Peculiar circumstances brought you together. She thought that she loved you passionately. Has she made a mistake? The future will tell us. But she fled just at the moment when she said that she proposed to declare herself. She left you to wait and suffer without sending you a word of consolation. If I have doubted her, you must agree that appearances are against her. Then you think that prejudice has more power over her than love? You think that she lied when she talked to me enthusiastically of the modest life she proposed to adopt, and told me how little she cared for honors and titles. I do not say that. I say that she may have made a mistake concerning the strength of her attachment to you, and the reality of her distaste for society. So that if somebody should tell you that you have guessed right, you would not be surprised. Not very much, and not greatly grieved either. If your regret for her should be very great, my grief would be equally great, my poor child. If, on the other hand, you should bravely make the best of it, I should say that it was better so, and that you can surely find a more prudent and stronger-willed woman to love. Poor Julie, said Julian to himself. So her love for me was a mistake and a weakness, even in my mother's eyes. Well, set your mind at rest, he said aloud. She renounces the dream we dreamed together. She no longer believes in it. She is afraid that I will remind her of it. All that you foresaw has proved to be true. Marcel has just told me so. I have given him my word that I will never see her again. End of section 31. Section 32 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Chapter 7, Part 5. Great heaven, exclaimed Madame Thierry in dismay. How calmly you say that. Is it true that you are really so tranquil in your mind as this? As you see, I was overwhelmed the first few days, and I did not conceal it from you to any great extent. But as time passed, I understood Madame d'Estrel's silence. The tranquility that you observe today is the result of 2 months of reflection. So don't be surprised at it, and believe that I am proud enough and sensible enough to overcome the pain I may have felt. Julian's resolution was not feigned. He was perfectly honest in it, but he suffered too keenly to half confess his suffering. The better way was to refrain from any confession whatsoever. In the evening, as it was very warm, Julian went out to take a bath in the river. Ordinarily, he joined a number of young artists employed in the porcelain factory, whom he advised and instructed. But on this evening, feeling that he must be alone, he avoided them and went to a deserted spot on the outskirts of a piece of woodland. It was dull, lowering weather. Julian jumped into the water mechanically, and suddenly this thought came to his mind as he was swimming about. This is a terrible blow, from which I feel that I can never recover. If I should stop paddling here for a few moments, the water would swallow up my grief and keep the secret of my discouragement. As he reflected thus, Julian ceased to swim and sank rapidly. He thought of his mother's despair, and when he touched bottom, he pushed himself up with his foot and returned to the surface. He was a good swimmer and could play with death, thus without any risk. But the temptation was strong, and the thought of suicide produces a terrible vertigo. 3 times he abandoned himself to the temptation, with increasing excitement, and 3 times he recovered himself, with decreasing resolution. As a 4th paroxysm, more violent than the others, was impending, Julian rushed ashore, afraid of himself, and threw himself on the sand, crying, "Forgive me, Mother." And he wept bitterly for the first time since his father's death. Tears did not relieve him. The tears of strong men are horrible cries and stifling sobs. He blushed to feel that he was so weak, and had to confess that he would be like that for a long while, perhaps forever. He returned home, dissatisfied with himself, and almost cursing the days of happiness he had enjoyed. He raged in his heart and, wandering alone through the garden while his mother slept, and the lightning constantly set the horizon on fire, he reproached his mother for loving him too well, and depriving him of liberty to dispose of himself. "Why," he exclaimed, "to live always for some other than oneself is downright slavery. I have no right to die. Why have I a mother? They who belong to no one are the happiest. They can, if they still love a broken life, hurl themselves into the dissipation which distracts the mind, into the debauchery which intoxicates. But I have not even that right, nor have I the right to be depressed and ill. I must burn at a slow fire, smiling all the while. A tear is a crime. I cannot breathe heavily, dream, utter an exclamation in the night without my mother rushing to my side, terrified and ill herself. I cannot depart from my habits, go on a journey, seek oblivion and diversion in motion and fatigue. Anything of that sort would worry her. To live without me would kill her. I must be a hero or a saint so that my mother may live. Happy are the orphans and abandoned children. They are not doomed to bear a burden beyond their strength." Julian had no sooner given vent to this revolt against destiny than other blasphemies entered his mind. Why had Julie disturbed his dream of self-sacrifice and virtue? Had he not accepted all the duties of his position? Had he not performed those duties faithfully? By what right did that woman, because she was tired of solitude, take possession of his solitude? Was it not cowardly and blameworthy of her to give him a glimpse of the joys of heaven? although he neither hoped nor asked for anything, and then leave him to the humiliation of having believed in her. "You have made me a miserable wretch," he cried in the depths of his wrathful heart. "You are the cause that I no longer esteem myself, that I no longer love my art, that I curse my mother's love, that I no longer believe in my strength of will, and that I have felt the shameful and idiotic thirst for suicide. You deserve that I should revenge myself on you, that I should go to you among your friends and reproach you with the destruction of my beliefs, my peace of mind, and my dignity. I will do it. I will say to you, I will trample you under my feet." Then he thought of the future which Julie apparently had in mind for herself, and all the horrors of jealousy rose before him. He saw her in the arms of another, and he dreamed of the murder of his rival in every possible form. He went out into the country and walked at random. He found himself once more on the shore of the stream. The storm broke, and the lightning struck a tall tree not far from him. He darted in that direction, hoping that another bolt would strike him. He roamed about in torrents of rain, unheeding, and did not return until daybreak, ashamed to be seen in that state of insanity. He slept 2 hours and woke completely crushed, horribly frightened by what had taken place within him, and resolved not to allow himself to be taken by storm again, by a violent passion of which he had not hitherto realized the extreme danger. He had much difficulty in rising. He breakfasted with his mother. "I have always believed," he said to her, "that love, being the supreme blessing, should exalt us and sanctify us. I see now that love is the very acme of selfishness, and that it may make us bloodthirsty or idiotic. Love must be conquered, but love cannot be broken like a chain. It must be allowed to die out little by little." Julian had a violent attack of fever and delirium. His mother divined his suffering, and she too cursed poor Julie in her heart. Meanwhile, Marcel had gone to see Julie. "Madame," he said, "you must return to your own house." "Never, my friend," she replied, with her heart-rending sweetness. "I am very comfortable here. I live on my little income. I lack nothing. I am not unhappy, and unless you want to occupy this house." "This house is not mine. I deceived you about it, but you are at liberty to remain here, unless, out of regard for Julian, you will consent to what I ask." "For Julian, you say? What do you mean?" "Julian knows where you are. He knows that you do not propose to see him again. He swears that he will not try to disobey you. He submits absolutely to a decision of the reason for which he is ignorant. You have, therefore, no further cause for remaining in concealment." "Ah, very well," said Julie with a bewildered air. "But in that case, where shall I go?" "To your house in Paris." "I no longer have a house." "Possibly, but you are supposed to own your hotel temporarily. People suppose that you are engaged in arranging a settlement with Monsieur Antoine. You must show yourself, so that a mysteriously prolonged absence may not furnish food for slanderous suspicions." "What do you expect people will say?" "All that they can say of a woman who has something to conceal." "What does it matter to me?" "For Julian's sake you ought to be most careful of your reputation, which we have succeeded thus far in preserving intact." "Julian knows perfectly well that I have nothing with which to reproach myself." "It is because he knows it that he will fly at the throat of the first man who presumes to say a word against you." "Let us go, then," said Julie, ringing for Camille. "I will do whatever you choose, my friend, provided that I need never see Monsieur Antoine again." "Do not say that, madame. I have a single remaining hope." "Ah, you still have hope, have you?" said Julie with her heart-rending smile. I should lie if I said that was very well founded, replied Marcel sadly, but I cannot abandon it until the last extremity. Do not deprive me of the means of breaking down Monsieur Antoine's obstinacy. What is the use? Queried Julie. Didn't you tell me that the marriage of a titled woman to a plebeian meant unhappiness, persecution, and a horrible struggle for the plebeian? Ah, madame, if the plebeian were very rich, most people would forgive you. Then you would have me ask your uncle to enrich the man I love? I must dishonor myself in my own eyes, in Julian's too, perhaps, to earn the forgiveness of a society without honor and without heart? You ask too much of me, Marcel. You abuse my utter prostration. May God give me strength to do but one thing, resist you, for, after that disgrace, I should feel that I had delayed too long to die. Poor Marcel was overdone with fatigue and disappointment. He wore himself out in words and efforts of every sort, and he succeeded only in rescuing all his friends from poverty and saving the material comforts of life for them. He could do nothing for their mental condition, and he said to his wife every night, "My dear love, there is nothing falser than reality. I am moving heaven and earth to provide them with the means of living, and I succeed only in killing them by inches." End of section 32. Section 33 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Chapter 8. Julie returned to Paris. She found there her luxurious surroundings, her carriages, her jewels, and her servants. Monsieur Antoine had looked after everything. Nothing about her was changed. She paid no heed to anything. In vain did Marcel hope that she would experience a sort of satisfaction, even if it were only a matter of instinct, in returning to her ordinary surroundings. He was alarmed and almost vexed by that immovable indifference. He had notified those of her friends whom he was able to reach, in order to force her to be on her guard before them. She greeted them without warmth, and when they expressed concern at her pallor and her air of depression, she attributed everything to a cold she had taken on the journey, which had detained her in the country an unconscionably long time. It was nothing, she said. She had been much worse. She was better now. She had preferred not to write in order not to make her friends anxious. She promised to see her physician and to get well. 2 days later, the Baron d'Ancourt appeared. "I did you an ill turn," she said. "I am sorry, and I have come to ask you to forgive me." "I bore you no grudge," Madame d'Estrelles replied. "Yes, I know that you are either a great philosopher or a great saint, but you are a woman all the same, my friend. You have been persecuted, and you are suffering." "I don't know what you mean." "Oh, mon Dieu! I know that the persecution by your creditors has lasted long enough for you to have become used to it. But it seems that the time came when you were within an ace of losing everything. They say that you obtained another respite, but with much difficulty, and with the certainty that it was merely falling back so as to jump higher. You told Madame de Morges that, didn't you?" "Yes, it is true. I am only here now, pending a final settlement." "But you will save something." "I have no desire to save anything that came from Monsieur d'Estrelles. It is my duty and my purpose to give up everything." "Oh, in that case, I see why you were so pale and so changed. I had understood that you displayed wonderful resignation, but that you were sick with anxiety. Now, my dear, you make a mistake in rejecting the consolations of your friends. It is a noble role that you are playing, but it will kill you. If I were in your place, I would shriek and complain. That would not remedy anything, but it would relieve me. And then people would talk about it. Society would be interested in me. It is always a comfort to attract attention, whereas you allow yourself to be buried alive without saying a word, and society, which is supremely selfish, forgets you. They were talking about you last night at the Duchess de B's. That poor Madame d'Estrelles, they said. You know she is really ruined. She won't have enough to hire a cab in which to pay her visits. What? Said the Marquis de S. We shall see such a pretty woman as she is, splashed with mud like a spaniel. Impossible. It's sickening. Is she very miserable over it? Why, no, Madame de Morges replied. She says that she will get along. She is an astonishing creature. Thereupon they began to talk about something else. The moment that you show that you are brave, no one thinks of pitying you, especially as it's so convenient to think of no one but oneself. Julie contented herself with a smile. You have a smile that frightens me, continued the Baroness. Do you know, my dear, I believe you are very ill. Oh, I don't believe in sparing people. If you do that, a person may neglect herself and die, or else drag along in misery and become ugly, and that is even worse than dying. Take care of yourself, Julie. Don't abuse your health as you are doing. Your great courage won't carry you as far as you think, I tell you. Everyone knows that it is not possible to lose everything without a regret. Look you, I propose to tell you again, even though I make you angry, that you did very wrong not to marry that rich old fellow, and perhaps it is not too late to change your mind. No one would blame you now, when a woman no longer has anything. Are you entrusted with new proposals from him? Queried Julie, with some bitterness. No, I haven't seen him since the day you and I fell out because of him. He has made several attempts to surprise me, but I had barricaded myself against his visits. But I don't say this to turn you against him. If he comes again, don't turn him away. And if he marries you, be very sure that I will take it on myself to receive him on your account. You are too kind, said Julie. Come, come, you are still distant and haughty with me, and yet I am your friend. I have proved it. I broke a lance for you not long ago. Some cowardly wretch of the Marquise d'Estrelles' set ventured to cast a slur on you because of a little painter, you know, the son of the famous theory, who lived at the end of your garden, by the way. I imposed silence on him. I said that a woman like you did not dishonor herself by being a sociable disposition. And then, all of a sudden, I was seconded by Abbe de Nevers, who said, that young man doesn't even know her. He has gone to Sevres to live with his mother. He is an excellent young man. He says that he never saw Madame Estrelle in all the time that he lived near her, and it is the truth. By the way, you are interested in those people, aren't you? The mother especially. Do you ever see her now? She no longer needs me. I have no reason to see her. Then I see that everything is all right, except your health, which disturbs me. Will you come to Chantilly with me? I am going to pass a month there. We shall see plenty of society, and perhaps it will set you up. Then, if you recover your lovely coloring, perhaps we shall find a husband for you. Madame d'Ancourt departed at last, chattering volubly, offering her services, and sympathizing with her friend to the very step of her carriage, abusing egotists, and in reality caring for nothing on earth but herself. She is too proud and too suspicious, that Julie, she said to herself. Faith, I'll not go to see her again very soon. She is distressing. If she needs me, she will know where to find me. It was almost the same story with all Madame de Stael's acquaintances. She had never understood so well the abandonment which befalls all those who abandon themselves, and she abandoned herself the more completely in that she felt that her heart was becoming withered. When she had passed several days without apparently giving any thought to the subject of her future action, she roused herself one morning to say to Marcel, I have done what you wished me to do. I have shown myself and explained my absence. I have said that I am to go away before long. It is time to have done with it and to turn over the house to Monsieur Antoine. It is my purpose to go to live in the provinces, in some lonely place where I shall be entirely forgotten. I shall take nobody but Camille. Do me the favor to advise me in the selection of an out-of-the-way place and a very modest dwelling. There is one great difficulty, said Marcel, and that is that Monsieur Antoine will not assent to any settlement, that his receipt in full is in my wallet, and that he has not yet any idea that it has not been accepted. You took that receipt from him, exclaimed Julie indignantly. He believes that I will accept it. You had not the courage to tear it up and throw the pieces in his face. Oh, I beg your pardon, Marcel. I forget that he is your kinsman, that for your sake you must treat him gently. Very well, give me the receipt, and bring Monsieur Antoine to me. This must be settled today. I will undertake to settle it. Take care, madame, said Marcel, in whose breast a faint hope revived, as he discovered the vulnerable point in Madame de Stael, at which lightning flashes of energy could still be produced. Monsieur Antoine is very irritable too. His self-esteem is bent upon having you for his debtor. Do not so act with him that he will detest Julian. Is not Julian's future assured? Yes, if all the conditions of the arrangement are observed, and I should lie if I told you that Monsieur Antoine is aware of your refusal to observe that one in which you are concerned. Oh, mon Dieu, what a position you have put me in, Marcel, with your blind devotion to practical affairs, with your obstinate determination to save me from poverty. You have degraded me. That man believes that I have sold my heart, that he has bought it with his money, and Julian also believes that I have betrayed love for wealth. Ah, you would have done better to kill me. Today I feel that I cannot bear it all, and that I must die. Julie sobbed as if her heart would break. It was a long time since she had wept. Marcel preferred to see her so, rather than changed into a statue. He hoped for some favorable result from a violent paroxysm. He tried deliberately to cause it. Scold me, curse me, he said to her. I did it all for Julian. That is true, of course, replied Julie. I do wrong to blame you for it. Forgive me, my friend. Are you perfectly sure that if I offend Monsieur Antoine by my refusal, everything that he has done for Julian will be in danger of being undone? Indubitably. And Monsieur Antoine will be justified on equitable grounds. He is waiting, with an impatience which begins to alarm me, for you to proclaim his merits and cease to be ashamed of his benefactions. You must drink this cup. You must drink it for love of Julian, if, as I suppose, that love is not dead. Let us not talk about that. I will drink the cup to the dregs. But how shall we explain to the world the generosity which I am forced to accept? What reason can we give for it? The world will suppose that I have fawned upon that old man, that I have bewitched him by degrading coquetries. Perhaps they will say something worse. Yes, madam, said Marcel, determined to venture upon one supreme test to make sure of Julie's sentiments. The evil-minded will say all that, and I do not, as yet, see any way to prevent their saying it. We will try to find a way, but if we cannot, will your devotion to Julian go so far as the sacrifice I ask? Yes, said Madame de Staël, I will go on to the end. Tell me, is there not something to sign? And she thought, I will kill myself afterward. You have to enter into no new engagements, replied Marcel. But you must consent to receive Monsieur Antoine and thank him. I am certain now that he would really make Julian a rich man if you would agree to a sort of reconciliation. Bring Monsieur Antoine here, said Julie. I will kill myself tonight, she said to herself, when Marcel had gone. Julie's love had made such progress in her despair that she was no longer capable of sound reasoning. Her love had become an accepted martyrdom. She lived wholly on the excitement of that martyrdom. She wrote to Julian, Here is the key to the pavilion. Come at midnight, you will find me there. I am going on a long journey. I want to say adieu to you forever. She put the key in the letter, sealed it, ordered the most reliable of her servants to mount and ride at full speed to Sèvres and bring her a reply. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. She went out into the garden to await Monsieur Antoine and stopped on the edge of the pond. The water was not very deep, but by lying down at full length, one who wants to die can always find a way. The variety of suicide which had so tempted Julian a few days before suggested itself to her with ghastly tranquility. Nobody else on earth cares for me, she thought. As I cannot be his, I will not be any man's. An infernal hatred has seized me by the throat and strangled me in the midst of my life and my happiness. They are not satisfied to deprive me of love and liberty. They seek to deprive me of honor, too. Marcel himself said that I must consent to be reputed that old man's mistress. Ah, if Julian knew that, how he would abhor the comfort in which his mother is living. And if she should suspect it, they shall both remain in ignorance of it. I am determined. My death will be the result of an accident. It will be impossible to retract the bargain we are about to make. Julian will be rich and honored. No one will ever guess at what price. Once more the thought passed through Julie's mind that it was in her power and Julian's to shake off all these chains and to be united in spite of poverty. He would be happier so, she thought, and perhaps I am sacrificing myself to his undoing. But who knows where Monsieur Antoine's hatred would stop? A raving maniac is capable of anything. Perhaps he would have him murdered. Has he not secret agents, spies, cutthroats in his service? Her brain was in a whirl. She walked round and round the basin as if she were impatiently awaiting the fatal hour. And then, when she thought that she was about to see Julian again, her heart returned to life with a mighty throb, and beat as if it would burst. She had no feeling of remorse, no scruple about breaking oaths extorted from her by the most revolting moral constraint. When one is at the point of death, she said to herself, one has the right to protest before God against the iniquity of his executioners. At that moment, there was an extraordinary power of reaction in that woman, naturally so gentle and submissive. It was like the sudden boiling of a placid lake, caused by a volcanic disturbance, or like the blazing up of a flame just on the point of dying. She was feverish. She was no longer herself. End of section 33. Section 34 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. She saw Monsieur Antoine approaching with Marcel, and she mechanically seated herself to receive him, on the bench where, 3 months earlier, the old man had made the strange and absurd proposition, her rejection of which had cost her so dear. As on that day, she heard the foliage rustle and saw the sparrow Julian had tamed, flapping his wings and apparently hesitating whether he should light on her shoulder. The little creature had taken a liking to freedom. Julian, being unable to find him as they were going away, had left him behind, hoping that Julie, whose long absence he did not foresee, would be very glad to find him there. Since her return, Julie had seen him several times not far away, friendly but suspicious. She had tried in vain to induce him to come nearer, but this time he allowed himself to be caught. She was holding him in her hands when Monsieur Antoine accosted her. She smiled and saluted him with a bewildered air. He spoke to her, unconscious of what he was saying, for his long exercise of absolutely despotic power had failed to overcome his timidity at the beginning of an interview. After his inevitable moment of stammering, he could succeed in saying nothing more than this. "Ah, so you still have your sparrow." "It is Julian's sparrow, and I love it," replied Julie. "Here, do you want to kill it? Here it is." Her manner of speaking, her livid pallor, and the savagely indifferent air with which she offered him the poor little bird, all warm with her kisses, made a profound impression on Monsieur Antoine. He looked at Marcel as if to say, "Is she mad, I wonder?" And instead of twisting the sparrow's neck as he would have done 3 months earlier, he pushed it away, saying stupidly, "Pshaw, pshaw, keep the thing. There's no great harm in it." "You are so kind," rejoined Julie, with the same feverish bitterness. "You have come to receive my thanks, haven't you? You know that I accept everything, that I am happy now, that I no longer love anything or anybody, that you have done me the very greatest service, and that you can say to God every night, 'I have been good and great like unto thee.'" Monsieur Antoine stood with his mouth open, uncertain whether Madame d'Estrelles said these things to make sport of him or to thank him, too cunning to trust, too dull to understand. "She is going to fly in my face," he whispered to Marcel. "You deceived me, you rascal." "No, Uncle," Marcel replied aloud. "Madame la Comtesse is thanking you. She is very ill, as you see. Do not ask her to make long speeches." Marcel had relied on the impression that the alteration in Julie's features would probably produce on Monsieur Antoine. That impression was in truth profound. He stared at her with a dazed, cruel, yet terrified expression, and said to himself with a joy not unmingled with terror, "That is my work." "Madame," he said after a moment's hesitation, "I said that I would be revenged on you, that I would force you to ask my pardon for your insults. Do you want to get through with it and admit that you were in the wrong? I ask nothing but that." "What is my offense?" said Julie. "Explain it so that I may know what it is." Antoine was sorely embarrassed to reply, and his anger, which had almost disappeared, reawoke, as always happened when he had no charge to make which would bear the test of common sense. "Ah, so you don't think you have insulted me?" he said. "Very good, Mordi. You shall ask my pardon in so many words if you don't want Julian to have to pay for you." "Must I ask your pardon on my knees?" queried Julie, with a heart-rending attempt at arrogance. "Suppose that I should demand that," retorted the old man. dizzy with anger when he felt that he was defied. "Here I am," said Madame d'Estrelles, kneeling before him. That was for her the last station on the road of martyrdom, the apology which the innocent victim was compelled to make, with the rope about the neck and the torch in the hand, before ascending the scaffold. At that moment of sublime self-immolation, her angered heart suddenly overflowed. Her face became transfigured. She smiled the ecstatic smile of the saints, and the ineffable beauty of heaven revealed was reflected in her eyes. Antoine did not understand, but he was dazzled. His anger subsided, not under the influence of emotion, but before a sort of superstitious terror. "That is all right," he said. "I am satisfied, and I forgive Julien. Adieu." He turned his back and fled. Marcel said to Julie a few encouraging words, which he did not hear or did not try to understand, that he ran after Monsieur Antoine. "Now, my excellent uncle," he said in the boldest and most stinging tone he had yet adopted with him, "you should be satisfied indeed. You have killed Madame d'Estrelles." "Killed her?" said his uncle, turning abruptly upon him. "What infernal nonsense is that?" "The nonsense would consist in taking her joy and her gratitude seriously, and you surely are not capable of that. That woman is in despair. She is dying of grief." "You lie. You were dodging the question. She is still a little angry. She is sick on account of the way I have thwarted her lately. But in reality she is making the best of it, and while she may be chafing at her bit, she sees well enough that I am saving her in spite of her. You save her from the chances of the future, it is true, and you take the surest means to do it, by depriving her of life. Well, well, there's another dodge. She caught cold passing the nights in the garden with her lover, and then she was bored to death in that convent at Chaillot, and even more in that barrack at Nanterre, where she was absolutely alone. You see that it was no use for her to hide. I know every place she has been to. I never lost track of her. You can't fool me. I saw the convent doctor. He told me that she had a streak of melancholy in her disposition, but that she had no serious disease. I have seen her Paris doctor, too. He says that he knows nothing about her sickness. If it was anything serious, he'd know what it was. Deuce take it. I know she's angry. People don't die of that. And now she'll get better. I give you my word." "And I," said Marcel, "give you my word that, with another week of the despair in which you are plunging her deeper and deeper, she will be lost beyond recall." "Oh-ho! So she loves that young dauber of canvas very dearly, does she? How about him? Does he still think of her?" "Julien's as badly off as she is, and in quite as alarming a frame of mind. I determined to make sure of it. I forced a confession from him with much difficulty, for he is not a man to complain. As for her, 2 whole months have passed and I haven't succeeded in extorting a word from her. Today, I determined to force her to the wall. I succeeded, and now my mind is made up." "To what? What do you propose to do?" "I propose to destroy the 2 papers I have in my pocket. Your receipt, which I have taken back from Madame d'Estrelles, and her promise never to see Julien again, which I have not yet delivered to you. You entrusted both of them to me, telling me to exchange your reciprocal pledges. I place you on your original footing by destroying them both. We must start afresh, and as I know your intentions and hers, I tell you now that Madame d'Estrelles will accept nothing from you, and that you can take possession of everything that belongs to her. Thus far she has followed my advice blindly. I have changed my views, and, as I have no desire to see her die, I advise her to retract her consent to everything." "Why, you're a miserable knave," said Monsieur Antoine, stopping short in the middle of the street and shouting at the top of his voice. "I don't know what keeps me from breaking my cane over your shoulders." "Knave indeed. When I give you back all your money and recover nothing for my client but the right to live in poverty. Nonsense. Just sue her and have the case aired in court, if you want to cover yourself with ridicule and shame." "But Julian, who I have made rich, you scoundrel, this is what I foresaw. You have cheated me." "Not at all, uncle. Julian has been seriously ill of late. He is still, and his mother said to me, 'Do whatever you choose. Let us return everything to Monsieur Antoine, and let Julie be restored to us.' So there you are, uncle. You don't lose an obulus. You recover principal and interest, and you leave us at liberty to live as we please, with no risk of losing our liberty by reason of any stipulation imposed by law or by private agreement." "Why, you miserable villain, how you recant! I took you for a sensible man. You agreed with me entirely. You disapproved of their marriage. You worked with me to provide for their happiness. True, until the day when I saw that happiness was taking them straight to the tomb. They are mad. Yes, uncle, they are mad. Love is a form of madness, but when it is incurable, we must yield to it, and I yield." "Very good," retorted Monsieur Antoine, flattening his hat over his eyes with a vicious blow. "Go and tell that lady to get out of her house. That it is to say my house, instantly. I will go to Sèvres and pack off the others. If the whole lot of them are not on the street in 2 hours, I'll send bailiffs, police agents. I'll set the houses on fire. His frantic threats became inaudible as he rushed madly away. He left Marcel in the street and returned home, unconsciously parodying Orestes pursued by the Furies. Marcel, undismayed, quietly followed him and disregarded the orders already given to admit no one. He was determined to come to blows with the servants if necessary. "You mean to go to Sèvres, do you?" he said. "I will go with you." "That's as you choose," said Uncle Antoine with lowering brow. "Have you notified Madame Julie to clear out of my house?" "Yes, that is done," replied Marcel, for he saw that the old man had lost his head completely, and that he did not know how few were the minutes passed since their altercation in the street. "Is she packing up? Is she taking away?" "She takes nothing," said Marcel. "She leaves everything for you. Are we going to Sèvres? Have you ordered the cab?" "My chaise and farm horse will go faster. They are being harnessed." He sat down on the edge of the table and seemed absorbed by his reflections. Marcel sat down opposite him, determined not to lose sight of him, at times fearing for his reason, at times dreading some diabolical suggestion of his wrath. When they entered the carriage, it was 7 o'clock at night. Marcel broke the silence. "What are we going to do at Sèvres?" he inquired. "You will see," Monsieur Antoine replied. After about 15 minutes, Marcel spoke again. "There is no need of your going there," he said. "The documents are in my office. It is simply a matter of tearing them up. And I will not allow you to make an absurd scene at my aunt's. I warn you. She is exceedingly anxious, for Julian is very ill, as I told you." "And you lied like a dog," retorted Monsieur Antoine. As he spoke, he pointed to a hired cabriolet, which was just passing them. Julian, pale and downcast, with contracted brow and preoccupied, determined air, was in the vehicle, and passed close to them without seeing them. He had received Julie's note. He had forced himself to rise, and, as he wished to ask Marcel some questions before keeping the appointment, he was driving in season to Paris. "If he is the one you want to speak to," said Marcel, "let us turn back. I will wager that he is going to see me." "He is not the one I want to speak to," rejoined Monsieur Antoine satirically, "since he is dying." "Do you think he looked well?" demanded Marcel. The uncle relapsed into his sullen silence. They went on toward Sèvres. Did he himself know what he was going to do there? Let us confess the truth. He had absolutely no idea. He was conscious that his mind was in great confusion, and his meditation was simply a sort of painful uneasiness concerning the discomfort he felt. With all this, he thought, I shall be the sickest of the three if I don't look out. Anger is an excellent thing. It keeps one alive. It helps out old age. And it is all up with an old man who allows himself to be led by the nose. But we shouldn't take too big a dose of it at once, and it would be well for me to cool off a little. End of section 34. Section 35 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Section 35. Thereupon, with a strength of will which would have made him a remarkable man if he had had better instincts or better guidance, he determined to take a nap, and slept quietly until the carriage entered the streets of Sèvres. Marcel was strongly tempted to order the coachman to return to Paris without his uncle's knowledge, but would the man have obeyed? Moreover, as Julien was out of the way, would it not be well to find out how Monsieur Antoine proposed to act with regard to Madame Thierry? He stood greatly in awe of her. Would he dare to tell her to her face that he proposed to take back his gifts? Sleep restored Monsieur Antoine to himself, that is to say, to his chronic state of deliberate aversion, jealous self-love, and brooding resentment. They found Madame Thierry in front of a fine portrait of her husband, at which she was gazing earnestly, as if seeking in the cheering serenity of that refined face the confidence in the future which had always sustained that fascinating man's happy temperament. Marcel had just time to hurry into the room first and say to her hastily, "Monsieur Antoine is at my heels. He is in a rage. You can save everything by much patience and firmness." Mon Dieu, what shall I say to him? That you give back what he has given you, but that you thank him for it. Julie adores Julien. Everything depends on Uncle. Here he is. Will you leave me alone with him? Yes, he insists upon it, but I will be close at hand, ready to interfere if necessary. Marcel walked quickly into an adjoining cabinet, threw himself into a chair, and waited. Monsieur Antoine entered Madame Thierry's salon by the other door. He was less timid when he did not feel Marcel's searching eye fixed upon him. "Your servant, Madame Andre," he said on entering. "Are you alone?" Madame Thierry rose, answered affirmatively, and courteously waved him to a chair. Her face, too, was greatly changed. She had passed several nights by her son's bedside, and when he insisted upon getting up and going away, despite her entreaties, she realized that the momentous crisis of the drama of his life was at hand. "Your son is sick," Monsieur Antoine began. "Yes, monsieur." "Seriously?" "God grant that he is not." "Does he keep his bed?" "He got up a short time ago." Can I see him? He has gone out, monsieur. Then he isn't so very sick. He was very sick until last night when he seemed a little better. What was the matter with him? Fever and delirium. Sunstroke? No, monsieur. Unhappiness, perhaps? Yes, monsieur, great unhappiness. Because he's in love? Yes, monsieur. But it's a stupid thing to be in love when one might be rich. It is of no use arguing about it, monsieur. Do you know what proposition I have come to make to you? No, monsieur. If you will send your son to America, I will place a considerable sum of money in his hands. I will direct his operations, and in 10 years he will return with 30,000 francs a year. On what conditions, monsieur? On condition that he says goodbye to a certain lady of our acquaintance, that's all. And if he refuses? If he refuses, and that is what I expect, I have been warned. A certain agreement between him and me with regard to that lady is null and void. Very good, monsieur, I understand. You have a right to do it, and we submit. But you can resist. You weren't consulted about accepting my presents. You didn't know the conditions agreed upon between Madame d'Estrelles and me. There is ground for a lawsuit, and I might lose it by means of a little bad faith on the part of my opponents. If you regard my son and myself as your opponents, you may rest easy, monsieur. We renounced your benefactions without a shadow of hesitation. Ah, yes, my benefactions. They are a burden to you. They make you blush. As we did not know that they put fetters on a person who is dear to us, they did not make us blush. Indeed, I may say, monsieur, added Madame Thierry, with a mighty effort due to her devotion to her son, your name would have been blessed in this house, if we had been certain that we owed that generosity to your solicitude for our welfare. Whatever its cause, and brief as its duration has been, we have been happy, amid all our troubles and anxieties, to live in this house once more, and to enjoy to the full our most cherished memories. You bid us leave them, and we obey. But it remains for me to thank you. You, madame? Said Antoine, gazing fixedly at her. Yes, for me to thank you for the 2 months that you have allowed me to pass here. The idea of never seeing the house again was very painful to me. It will be less so henceforth, and I shall look back to this brief stay here as to a last pleasant dream which will count for much in my life, and for which I shall be indebted to you. Madame Thierry spoke in a sweet voice, and with a refined accent which had always made her very fascinating. In his moments of spleen, Monsieur Antoine sourly called her the fine talker. He felt none the less the ascendancy of that still fresh voice, which caressed his ear with mild and almost respectful words. He had but little comprehension of sentimental refinement, but it seemed to him that he had found the submissive instinct of which he was so greedy. "Come, Madame Andre," he said, with the surly manner he always assumed when his ill humor was beginning to retreat. "You know how to say all you want to say, but in reality you can't endure me. You may as well admit it." "I do not hate anyone, monsieur, but you force me to confess that I am afraid of you." Nothing could have been more adroit than that reply. To inspire fear was in Monsieur Antoine's opinion the noblest attribute of power. He softened as if by a miracle, and said in an almost good-humored tone, "Why in the devil are you afraid of me?" Madame Andre had the penetration of women who have lived much in society, and the shrewdness of a mother pleading her child's cause. She saw what a long step forward she had taken. She forgot, and this time most opportunely, that she was 60 years old, and boldly decided to play the coquette. although it cost her more dearly to employ the ruse with Monsieur Antoine than with any other man. Brother, she said, it rested entirely with you to retain my confidence. I do not reproach you for betraying it. Your intentions were kind, but I misunderstood you. I was very young then, and in a plight where everything made me suspicious. I had had no experience of life. I thought that you were advising me to abandon Andre, whereas I said to you in so many words, save him. Yes, that is true. Your action was dictated by affection for him. Well, you see, I was blind, obstinate, whatever you choose to call it. But confess that you ought to have forgiven me for that, have treated me like the child I was, and become my brother once more as in the past. You want me to admit that? Why, you always showed me that cold shoulder after that. It was your place to laugh at my coldness, and to take my hand and say, Sister, you're a little fool. Let us embrace and forget the past. Ah, you think that I should have? The more entirely one is in the right, the more generous he should be. You talk that way now. It is never too late to see what is right and to arrange things that are out of place. So, now you are sorry that you wounded me? I am sorry for it, but if I ask your pardon, will you grant it? Ah, the deuce! It's not the same thing now, my fine lady. You need me now. Yes, Monsieur Antoine, I do need you. My son is mad with grief. Marry him to the woman he loves. Ah, there we are, cried Monsieur Antoine, flying into a rage again. We have been there all the time, replied Madame Thierry. I have asked you for nothing since you have been here, except liberty of action for Madame d'Estrelles. Yes, with plenty of money for everybody. No, no money, nothing. The sacrifice is made. Let us remain here as tenants. We will gladly pay for the privilege. And, if you are not willing, why, your will shall be done. But turn us away without hatred, and forgive us for being happy, for we shall be, even in poverty, if our hearts are content with one another, if we can say to one another that our happiness is no longer a source of affliction to you. Monsieur Antoine felt that he was beaten. He was ashamed of it, and clung to the last straw. That is your pride, he said. It's always the same thing, however you change it. The rich man's money is the object of your scorn. You snap your fingers at it. Take it all back. We want nothing. We haven't any needs. We live on air. What is this money? No better than pebbles to sensible minds. And yet, my fine lady, money honestly earned by a man who had nothing on his side but his natural genius ought to count for something. It's the working bee's honey. It's the tropical flower which is made to bloom in an artificial climate by the patience and skill of a master gardener. Ah, that is nothing, you think. With all his wit, my poor brother only succeeded in using up the money he earned by working like a hod-carrier. But I know how to make a different use of money. I save it. I add to it every day, and I make people happy when I choose. What are you driving at, Monsieur Antoine? Asked Madame Thierry, as she saw Marcel making unintelligible signs to her through the door behind Monsieur Antoine. I am driving at this, that you are not so good a mother as you think. You are willing to sacrifice everything to your son, except your contempt for the money that comes from me. In heaven's name, do you think I stole it? Does my gold stink? But why, in heaven's name, do you say such things to me? Why do you suppose that I refuse you the esteem you deserve? Because if you were a good mother, instead of talking this sort of nonsense to me, you would say, Brother, We are unfortunate and you are rich. You can save us. We are a little out of our heads. We want to pay court to Madame d'Estrelles, but that is no reason for leaving us without bread. Come, forgive us for everything at once. Indulge us with love and with bread to eat. It is humiliating to us, but no matter. We know that you are a noble-hearted and generous man. You will have pity on us and grant us all we ask. Yes, Madame Andre, that is what you would say, what you would ask on your knees, if, instead of being a great lady, you were really a good mother. Madame Thierry was speechless with surprise. She looked at Marcel, who, unseen by Monsieur Antoine, urged her by most energetic pantomime to yield to the old fellow's whim. The poor woman had a sinking at the heart, but she did not hesitate. She slipped from the chair to her hassock, on which she knelt, and said, taking both Monsieur Antoine's hands, "You are right, brother. You teach me my duty. I surrender. Be the noblest of men. Forgive everything and grant everything." "At last! Good!" cried Monsieur Antoine, rising. "And when people are reconciled, they embrace, don't they?" Madame Thierry embraced him, and Marcel entered to congratulate them. "Well," said the horticulturist, "you're a great fool, aren't you, Master Pettifogger? It was very pretty, your scheme of rebellion, to smash and break everything. What? Reduce your client and your family to want, all rather than give way to the rich man, the powerful man, the natural enemy of those who have nothing and don't know how to earn anything? A fine solicitor, on my word, who can't obtain anything for his clients but love and rye bread. Luckily, women are brighter than that. Here are two who sent me to the devil, and both of them have bent the knee to me tonight. Well, it is done, Madame, my sister. I shall never remind you of this, for I am generous, and when people do what I want, I know how to reward them. Your son shall marry the fair countess, whom I must turn out of her house because of what the world may say. But the Hotel d'Estrelles with 25,000 francs a year shall be Julien's marriage portion. That's the way I do things. And I know that you will thank me for it tomorrow, in earnest, for I am not deceived by the politics of the present day. But you have done what I wanted. You have submitted. I asked nothing but that." "You shall have more than that," said Madame Thierry. "You shall have the affection of warm and sincere hearts, and you shall know such happiness as you might have known long ago. But we will do all we can to make up for lost time." "That is mere talk," said Monsieur Antoine. "Happiness is being one's own master, and I don't need anybody to be mine. I don't like brats and mawkish sentiment. I wasn't made to be the father of a family, but I could have governed a country very well if I had been born a king. It has always been my whim to command, and I reign over whatever is within my reach much better than many monarchs who don't know what they are doing." End of section 35. Section 36 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Section 36. Despite the anxiety which Julien's absence caused her, and her longing to send Marcel after him, Madame Thierry felt called upon to invite Monsieur Antoine to supper. "Oh," said he, "I sup on a hard crust of bread and a glass of cheap wine. That is my habit. I have never cared much about eating." She gave him what he asked for, and Marcel hastened their departure. "I am sure that Julien is at my house waiting for me," he said to his aunt. He must be impatient because I do not return. But my wife is there, and she will keep him quiet. Juliet will chatter to him, and if he should be sicker, you may be sure that he is well taken care of." Julian was frantically impatient in very truth, despite the attentions which Madame Marcel lavished upon him. He had felt exceedingly weak when he arrived. He had tried to eat a little and to divert his thoughts with his godson's pretty prattle. But, as Marcel did not appear, when he heard the clock strike 11, he could stand it no longer. He declared that his mother would be anxious if he had not returned at midnight. He promised to take a cab to return to Sèvres, and started for Rue de Babylone on foot, with many detours and precautions, to avoid being watched and followed as formerly by some agent of Monsieur Antoine. He arrived unmolested. His actions were no longer watched. Monsieur Antoine had been spying upon Julie too long not to be sure that she no longer had any relations with Julian. At midnight, Julian, who had been at the door 15 minutes, entered and found Julie, who also had been waiting 15 minutes in the pavilion. At the same moment, Marcel, Monsieur Antoine, and Madame Thierry entered Paris by the Barrière de Sèvres. Monsieur Antoine's frugal supper and slow conversation had lasted a little too long to suit the widow. Being anxious about her son, she had asked for a seat in the chaise, that she might join Julian at Marcel's. As the moment for his meeting with Julie drew near, Julian had summoned all his courage. He anticipated a painful explanation. He had taken an inward oath that he would be neither angry nor reproachful, nor weak, and yet, when he opened the door, his hand trembled. A giddiness born of frenzy and despair made him hesitate and recoil. But the instant that she saw him, Julie uttered a joyful cry, threw her arms about his neck, and strained him passionately to her heart. They were in the dark. They could not see how changed they both were. They felt that their kisses were burning, and it did not occur to either of them that it might be with fever. At that moment, the only fever was that fever of love which gives life. They had forgotten that which causes death. But that moment of intoxication did not long endure in Julian's case. More alarmed than exhilarated by Julie's caresses, he hastily pushed her away. "Why do you still love me," he said, "if you still intend to leave me?" "Oh, perhaps it won't be for long," she replied. "You wrote me that this was an eternal farewell." "I don't know what I wrote. I was mad. But there can be no eternal farewell. It is not possible when two people love as we do." "Then you are going away, but will you return?" "If I can, yes. Let us not talk about that. This night is ours. Let us love." Amid the transports of love, Julian was again seized with terror. Julie unguardedly uttered excited words in which there was an indefinably ominous implication which made his blood run cold. "Ah," he exclaimed abruptly, "you are deceiving me. You are going away forever, or else you think that you are going to die. You were ill, I know, given up by the doctors, it may be." "No, I give you my word that the doctors promised to cure me." "I want to see your face. I can't see you here. Let us go out. I am afraid. It seems to me at times that I am dreaming, and that it is your ghost that I hold in my arms." He led her into the garden, where it was almost as dark as in the pavilion. "I can't see you, mon Dieu. I can't see your face," said Julian anxiously. "I can feel that your arms are thinner, that your waist is smaller. You seem to have become so light that your feet do not touch the gravel. Tell me, are you a dream? Am I here by your side in this garden, where we have been so happy? I am afraid I am mad." They drew near to the basin. There, As the moonless sky was without a cloud and was reflected in the water with all its stars, Julian saw that Madame de Staël was pale, and the whiteness of the water, reflected on her face, made her appear even more ghastly than she was. He could tell that her face had grown thin by the increased size of her eyes, which shone brightly in the darkness. "I was sure of it," he cried. "You are dying, and that is why you sent for me." "Very good, Julie. I will not leave you again if I am to lose you. I propose to receive your last breath and then die myself." "No, Julian, you cannot die. Think of your mother." "Why, my mother will die with us. What do you expect me to say to you? She would have liked to die on the day she lost my father. She said so unconsciously in her first frenzy, and since then, I have fully realized that she has lived only for me. We will all three go together, since we have but one soul between us, and we will go to a world where the purest love will not be a crime. There must be such a world for those who have never been able to understand the wicked prejudices of this one. Let us die, Julie, without remorse or vain regret. Give me your breath. Give me your fever. Give me your sickness. I swear that I will not survive you." "Alas," said Julie, unable to restrain that outcry of nature, "I might have been cured." "What do you mean?" cried Julian beside himself. "Have you taken poison? Answer, tell me. I insist upon knowing." "No, no, I have not," she replied, dragging him away with a sudden, desperate movement, which made a profound impression on him. She had been leaning over the water. She had seen therein the reflection of her face in her white dress. She had remembered that an hour later she must be lying there motionless, dead. She had sworn it. That was the price of her broken oath. That was the price of Julian's happiness. A ghastly fear of death had made her shudder and start back. "What are you afraid of?" he asked her. "What did you see in the water? What were you thinking about? What made you fly? Ah, I can guess. You intend to die soon, immediately, as soon as I have gone. But I say that it shall not be. You are my wife. Since you still love me, you belong to me. I don't know what oath you have taken. I don't know what constraint has been put upon you. But I, your lover, your husband, your master, release you from everything. I will carry you off by force. No, I will take you with me. That is my right. I do not propose that you shall die. And I propose that my mother shall live to bless you. I have strength for us both. I don't know what sort of battle I shall have to fight, but I will fight it. Come, let us go. If you haven't strength to walk, I have strength to carry you. Come, I insist. The time has come for you to acknowledge no other power over your life than mine." As, while leading her back to the pavilion, he led her in the direction of the basin, the combat between remorse and love in her heart became so violent that she uttered a cry of horror, and clinging to him with all her strength, she said, "I pledged my word of honor to leave you, and I am breaking my pledge and reducing your mother to want. Can you relieve me from that burden?" "You are mad," said Julian. "Was my mother so very poor when you first knew her? Will my right arm be cut off to keep me from working? Very well. Then I will work with my left arm." "Ah, I understand everything now. This is the revenge threatened by Monsieur Antoine. I ought to have guessed sooner why our father's house was given back to us. Poor Julie, you are sacrificing yourself for us. But that is all null and void. I have not consented. I have accepted nothing. I submitted, knowing nothing about it. Come, do not tremble any more. I release you from your promise, and woe to the man who dares to remind you of it. If you hesitate, if you shrink from anything, I shall believe that wealth is what you regret, and that you have less courage and love than I. Ah, that is the suspicion I dreaded so, said Julie. Let us go, but where shall we go? How shall I dare appear before your mother and say, I bring you sorrow and ruin? Julie, you doubt my mother. You no longer love us. Let us go, she repeated. Let us go to her, and let her decide my fate. Take me away from here. Julie was completely crushed by such a multitude of emotions. Her strength failed her, and Julian, as he caught her in his arms, saw that she had fainted. It was impossible to do anything for her in the pavilion, so he carried her to her apartment, the garden door being open and the room lighted. He deposited Julie on a sofa, and she speedily recovered consciousness, but when she attempted to rise, she fell back. Ah, my dear, she said, I cannot stand. Am I going to die here? Is it too late for you to save me? Hark, someone is knocking on the street door, I think. No, said Julian, who had heard nothing. But as he strove to restore her confidence while his own was beginning to disappear, they were startled by a loud peal at the bell. They are coming after me, to carry me away, perhaps, said Julie wildly, to put me in a convent. The Marchioness, Monsieur Antoine, I don't know who, and I cannot fly. Take me away. Hide me, Julian. Wait, said Julian, who had opened an inner door and was listening. It is Marcel calling Camille. Yes, it is some urgent matter. Admit him yourself. I cannot, said Julie in despair after one last effort. Very well, I will go, said Julian resolutely. He must see me here in any event, as I do not propose to leave this house without you. He hurried to the door of the vestibule, where Marcel was ringing as if he would pull the house down, and before any servant had time to rise and find out what the matter was, Julian opened the door to Marcel and Madame Thierry. He admitted them and locked the doors behind them. Ah, my child, cried Madame Thierry, I was very sure that I should find you here. Victory, Julian, my poor Julian. Ah, I don't know what I am saying. You will be cured at once. We bring you happiness. When Julie learned what had happened at Severus, life returned to her as it returns to a half-dead plant when the rain falls upon it. Her tense nerves were relaxed by tears of joy. As for Julian, who was almost dangerously ill the day before, he was cured like those paralytics whom a beneficent thunderclap causes to walk and leap about. After an hour passed in an outpouring of emotion which seemed inexhaustible, Marcel took Madame Thierry home with him to obtain a little rest, and entrusted Julie to the care of Camille, who undertook to keep the servants quiet concerning that nocturnal visit. Julian had already made his escape through the pavilion. Julie slept as she had not slept for a long while. Luckily, as we have said, Monsieur Antoine no longer kept spies about the Hôtel d'Estrelles, and luckily, too, the servants were discreet and devoted to their mistress, for if the rich man had learned of that interview, he might have been made dangerously angry and have changed his mind. He had expressed a desire to inform Madame d'Estrelles of her pardon with his own lips, but he was too tired. Relaxed, satisfied, proud of himself, he slept soundly and rose a quarter of an hour later than usual. He was no sooner on his feet than he redoubled his ordinary activity and put his whole household in deadly fear, for he was sharp to command, quick to threaten, and even quicker to raise his hand, armed with a cane, against the sluggish. The old Hôtel de Malizia was thrown open, swept and put in order in the twinkling of an eye. Messengers were dispatched in all directions, and at noon a sumptuous dinner was served. The guests, assembled in the large gilded salon, anticipated some mysterious event. Marcel brought Madame Thierry and Madame d'Estrelles, whom he had invited in the master's behalf. Julian, too, had been notified, and arrived in due season. Julie was received by Madame de Court, Madame Desmorges, her daughter, and her son-in-law. The Duc de Quesnoy had not returned, but Abbe de Nevers was there, determined to eat for two. Madame la Presidente did not keep them waiting, and Marcel was commissioned to present the ladies a collection of botanists, learned professors and collectors, whom Monsieur Antoine was wont to convoke on great occasions. "It is enough to make one die laughing," said the Baroness to Julie, leading her unto a window recess. "The good man sent a messenger to me at 6 o'clock this morning to invite me to witness the christening of a rare plant which is to bear his name. You can imagine what a pleasant awakening it was. I was furious, but I discovered in a postscript that you were to attend the ceremony, and I decided that I would come. So you are reconciled to your old neighbor, are you, my dear? Well, so much the better. You have followed my advice, and you will come to it at last, I tell you. The gardener isn't attractive, but 5 millions. Remember that." Julie's other friends thought differently. They supposed that Antoine had made an amicable arrangement with her, which was satisfactory to them both, and that they ought to accept this invitation in order to do this friend a service. They questioned Julie with that theory in mind, and Julie did not undeceive them. As for the professors, the ostentatious christening of a new plant did not seem particularly absurd to them. Monsieur Thierry had enriched horticulture with several interesting specimens. He had fostered the acclimatization of useful trees, and his name well deserved a figure in the annals of science. A good dinner on such an occasion does no harm, and the presence of a number of attractive women is not absolutely inconsistent with the solemn preoccupations of botany. End of section 36. Section 37 of Antonia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives. Chapter 8, Part 5. When everybody had arrived, Monsieur Antoine assumed a modest and good-humored air, a rare but certain symptom of inward triumph unmingled with suspicion. He placed everybody round a large table, in the center of which an object of considerable height was concealed under a great bell of white paper. Then he took from his pocket a treatise in manuscript, luckily very short, but which it was difficult to listen to without laughing, for in it French and Latin were murdered with the utmost coolness. The manuscript of his own composition, which began with Messrs. et Madames, and which treated of the importation and cultivation of the most beautiful lilies known, concluded thus: "Having had what I considered the advantage of buying, raising, and bringing to perfect bloom the only specimens in France of a lily which exceeds in size, in fragrance, and in splendor all varieties above mentioned, I called the attention of the honorable company to my individual, and invite them to give it a name." Having concluded the reading of his speech, Monsieur Antoine deftly raised, with the end of a reed, the white paper covering, and Julian uttered a cry of surprise when he saw the Antonia Thierry perfectly fresh and blooming in all its glory. He believed at first that there had been some trickery, that it was a perfect artificial imitation, but the plant, when the covering was removed, gave forth a perfume which recalled to his mind, and Julie's as well, the first day of their passion, And when the clamor due to sincere or courteous admiration had made the circuit of the table, Monsieur Antoine added, Messieurs les savants, you must know that this plant put forth 2 shoots, the first one late in May, a very pretty specimen, accidentally broken, and preserved in an herbarium close by. The second in August, twice as large and full as the other. It blossomed, as you see, the 10th day of said month. Christen, christen, cried Madame d'Ancourt. I would like to stand godmother to that lovely lily, but I fancy that another. She glanced at Julie with a mixture of irony and goodwill. The professors paid no heed, but unanimously proclaimed the name of Antonia Thierry. You are very kind, messers, said Monsieur Antoine, flushing with pleasure and stammering with emotion. But I have a slight modification to suggest to you. It is no more than fair that this plant should bear my name, but I should like to prefix the name of a person who, of a lady who, in short, I asked to have it called the Julia Antonia Thierry. That's a little long, said Marcel, but then the plant is so tall. Julia Antonia Thierry it is, replied the professors artlessly. Ah, at last, bravo! So it's decided, cried the Baronne d'Ancourt, pointing to Julie and making the sign indicating union with her plump white hands. Every eye turned upon Julie, who blushed, and thereby recovered all the splendor of her beauty. Excuse me, Madame la Baronne, said Uncle Antoine with a sly expression. I tricked you by going to your house to beg you to make an offer of marriage to Madame d'Estrelles in my behalf. I wanted to see what you would say, and you didn't say no. On the contrary, you advised that young lady to accept me. That was what led me to propose to her the man I had in view for her. For I said to myself, if an old fellow like me is eligible because of his money, my nephew, who is young and will have a good share of my money, may be accepted. That is how it happens, mesdames and messieurs, that, with the consent of Madame d'Estrelles, I concluded today the business troubles we have had by a marriage between her and my nephew Julien Thierry, whom I do myself the honor to present to you. Pshaw! The young painter, cried Madame d'Ancourt, irritated, she knew not why, by Julien's beauty and impassioned manner. A painter, said the bewildered Madame de Morges. Ah, my dear, so it was true after all, was it? Yes, my friends, it was true, replied Julie boldly. We loved each other before we knew that Monsieur Antoine would rescue us from the poverty that threatened us both. I declare that Monsieur Antoine is a great man and a true philosopher, cried Abbe de Nevers. Suppose we adjourn to the table. Let us go to dinner, mesdames and messieurs, said Monsieur Antoine, offering Julie his hand. You will say it is a misalliance, but 3 millions for each of my nephews, that helps to rub the dirt off a family, and my grandnephews will have money to purchase titles with. This last argument changed the blame of Julie's friends into somewhat reluctant congratulations. She had to resign herself to the necessity of appearing to sacrifice vainglory to wealth. But what did it matter to her after all? Julien knew what to think. Julie, who was still in mourning for her father-in-law, went to Sèvres to pass the rest of the summer. Sèvres is a Norman oasis within 2 leagues of Paris. The apple trees give it a rural savor, and the hills, covered with lovely rustic gardens, were at that time quite as charming and more unconventional than today. I must not, however, speak slightingly of the lovely villas of Sèvres as it now is, with their magnificent shade trees and the picturesque inequalities of the region through which the river boldly cuts its way. The railroad has not altogether dispelled the poesy of that wooded spot, and it is not unpleasant to be able to reach, in a quarter of an hour, the grass-grown paths and fields sloping to the water's edge. From the top of the hill one can distinguish Paris, an imposing silhouette against the blue sky, through the clumps of trees in the foreground. 3 steps away, in the bottom of the ravine, one can lose sight of the great city, turn away from the 2 white villas, and lose oneself in the genuine country, still unspoiled, although a bit rococo, and always lovely with flowers. There Julie recovered her health, which was seriously impaired for some time, and before as after their marriage, Julian was all in all to her, as she was all in all to him. What society said and thought of their union they did not care to know. Their real friends sufficed for them, and Madame Thierry was the happiest of mothers. Their happiness was disturbed, it is true, by the political tempests, the approach of which Julian had watched with no idea that they would be so swift and so radical. Having a clear conscience and a generous heart, he made himself very useful in his neighborhood by the pains which he took to relieve want and to prevent it, as far as he could, from urging its victims on to deplorable acts of violence. For a long time he exerted great influence over the workmen in the factory at Sèvres, and in the Faubourg, which surrounded the Hôtel d'Estrelles. On some days he was well-nigh overwhelmed, but nothing could induce him to do anything which his conscience disapproved, and he was threatened in his turn, and was very near being suspected. The firmness with which he faced suspicion, the generous personal sacrifices he had made, the confidence he displayed in the midst of danger, saved him. Julie was as brave as he. The timid woman was transformed. She felt that her soul had developed and been tempered anew in its fusion, brought about by love, with a fearless and upright soul. Her heart was torn, doubtless, when several of her old friends were struck down by the Revolution, despite all Julian's efforts to rescue them. She succeeded in saving some of them by judicious advice and prudent measures. She concealed 2 in her own house, but she was unable to save the Baronne d'Ancourt, who ruined herself by her excessive fright and underwent a most vigorous captivity. The unfortunate Marquise d'Estrelles could not restrain her rage when the forced loans encroached on her savings. She died on the scaffold. The Duc de Quesnoy emigrated. Abbé de Nivres prudently turned Jacobin. After the Terror, the suppression of the privilege attached to the royal establishments having enabled Julian to gratify a wish he had often formed, he labored to disseminate the industrial and artistic improvements which he had had leisure to study and to experiment upon at Sèvres. He earned no money by it, but that was not his object. In fact, he lost something, but he found therein the means of ameliorating the lives of many unfortunates. He was not rich, and his wife was overjoyed to see him continue his artistic work and devote himself lovingly to the education of his children. Marcel purchased a cottage near theirs at Sèvres, and the 2 families passed together all the holidays and days of rest which the worthy solicitor was able to steal from his business. He made a little fortune by honorable methods, and Julian was able to manage his own competence with the prudence his father had lacked. Well for him that it was so, for the revolutionary government confiscated Monsieur Antoine's property. The old man had continued to live alone, feeling no desire for family life, as gracious as it was in his power to be to the debtors whose gratitude flattered his pride, but unwilling to enter into any social relations which would have upset his habits. He had promised Marcel to think no more about marriage, and he kept his word, but he was attacked by another mania. He became, in politics, a reviler of all the events of the Revolution, whatever they might be. Everybody was mad, blundering, stupid. The king was too weak, the people too gentle, the guillotine too lazy and too greedy by turns. And then, as that succession of tragedies disturbed his brain, which was more mad than cruel, he changed his opinions and passed from the most unbridled sansculottism to the most laughable dandyism. All this was quite harmless, for he did not intrigue for place, but contented himself with breaking out in words in his rare incursions into society. But he was denounced by workmen whom he had maltreated, and came near paying with his head for his riotous indulgence in obscure eloquence. Julian Marcel, by tireless persistence, succeeded in inducing him to leave the Hotel de Melcy, where he defied the storm every day. They kept him out of sight at Sèvres, where he made them very unhappy by his evil humor, and compromised them more than once by his imprudent acts. His property was under sequestration, and he recovered only a few shreds. He endured that terrible blow with much philosophy. He was one of those pilots who curse during the tempest, but keep cool when it is a question of salvage. He refused to take back any part of what Julian had received from him, as his garden had not been injured and he recovered it almost intact. He resumed his former habits and recovered comparative good humor. He lived there until 1802, still active and robust. One day they found him sitting perfectly still on a bench in the sunshine, his watering pot half full beside him, and on his knees an undecipherable manuscript, the last lucubration of his worn-out brain. He had died without warning. The night before he had said to Marcel, "Never fear, you shall have the millions you expected to inherit from me. Let me live only about 10 years, and I shall make a larger fortune than I ever had. I have a scheme for a constitution which will save France from ruin. After that, I will think a little of myself and go back to my exporting business." End of section 37. End of Antonia by George Sand, translated by George Burnham Ives.